Well, hello everybody, it's Abigail Ockwell here and welcome back to another video. Now, this is going to be a video of two parts because this video we are going to be diving into the world of vampires. Seeing as it's Halloween, this is my series that I like to call my creepy stories, where I get into all sorts of creepy stuff just for the month of October, seeing as it is the spooky season. So, like I say, we're going to be diving into the realm of vampires today. We're going to be covering sort of, you know, the history of vampires and sort of all the stuff of how to prevent a vampire, you know, rising from its grave, how to kill one, what makes it weak, all the usual stuff. And we're also, next video, which I should hopefully be recording on Sunday, she hopes, but it might be Saturday because I've got to go out somewhere on Sunday. We are going to be going into a rather particular vampire called the Highgate Vampire, and I might throw in some other sort of well-known vampires if I can't sort of make it stretch, because I've been trying to do research, and honestly the whole vampire thing is just a massive can of worms. There's just so much about vampires and everything that, you know, it's like, okay, I can get the bare facts in one video, but then if I'm actually going to go into something specific, I'm going to have to just put that into another video, because this is probably going to go on way too long, just because, you know, vampires, there's a lot of stuff about vampires. So, obviously, vampires have been around for many years. They're every sort of culture, you know, every sort of period through time, I guess. Every society has had its own version of a vampire in some way. Now, in my original notes, in my little thing, I said that we'd be diving into the history of vampires. Yes, briefly. Yeah, not so briefly now. This is basically going to turn into the history of vampires. Forget that. There's sort of a lot of the folklore surrounding them. It even says there's so much that I could make multiple videos. Yeah, that's happening. This is a thing. We are now making multiple videos, and this is why it's probably taken so long for me to get all the research material together and just dive in. So, we're gonna take you back, you know, a very long time ago. So, we're gonna go back before the 19th century. So, sort of in the Middle Ages and everything before it, vampires were described very differently. So we all know, we all have our idea of vampire, the sort of thin, the dark, tall, sexy vampire. That sort of, you know, that we've all sort of grown. But that wasn't the original sort of look of a vampire. The original description of a vampire is they were made to look a lot more like a corpse, and that they are described in the Middle Ages as being bloated in appearance, ruddy, purplish or darkish in colour. So obviously these are sort of the characteristics of a dead body and the decaying process, because obviously, as we know, during the decaying process, you know, the skin sort of turns into this, has this sort of bluish tinge. It starts to get blotchy, and after a couple of days the stomach starts to bloat out. And they're always sort of characterised as, there's one thing that's never changed, they've always been told, it's always been said that they feed on some sort of life essence. And usually that life essence is in the form of blood. I have no idea what that was. It shouldn't be the builders because they've gone home for the day. And I have deliberately waited until they went home. It's probably about 8 o'clock at night. So yeah, they definitely shouldn't be doing any work now. And if they are, but they're doing it very unsafe. But anyway, back to this video. So this is going to be a very strange video. So, like I say, there have been over sort of the last sort of 500 years, the 500 years, there we go, we're going to go from there, sort of the 500 years that sort of vampires have been around. Not really, they've been around a lot longer, but the sort of through the ages where vampires have been around, they've obviously, as you've just heard from the original description, you know, they've obviously changed so much. And originally, it wasn't until sort of writers like Bram Stoker came around. Bram Stoker was the author of Dracula, very good read. I do actually touch quite a bit on Dracula and bring Bram Stoker's Dracula into it as sort of some of the things that I found I could sort of tie into the book and be like, here, this is what this happens. So the modern vampire sort of came around with writers such as Bram Stoker, and that was when he created this pale being, thin, you know, white marbly skin and fangs. Because originally vampires didn't have fangs. Which, you know, it kind of, if you think about it, you know, Bram Stoker was onto something. How else were they drinking? Were they drinking, you know, taking people's life essence? Were they just saying, oh yeah, can you just put a little cut so I can have a drink? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, nah, it doesn't really make sense. But obviously, like I said, the definition of what a vampire looks like has very, very much changed over the last sort of few years, you know. As we know, every culture, and even has its vampire, and even vampires have made it into religion. So, in Christianity, there we go, so there is a she-devil called Lilith. Now, originally, Lilith was created to sort of be the first wife of Adam, to be the first alternate wife to Adam. However, she became rebellious, she wouldn't do as she was told, and as a result, she was banished from the Garden of Eden, and God created Eve. And Lilith is very much depicted as drinking the blood of babies. She's with Estes, which is like a female vampire. So in Jewish culture, Hephaestus is their version of a female vampire. You know, female shapeshifters, blood-drinking demons, and they were all roaming around at night seeking their victims. So you can see there are some things that are starting to tie starting to tie the different attributes of what vampires can do. We've already got the blood drinking, we've got them walking around at night, and we've also got the shape-shifting, which we're going to go into a little bit later. But I'm going to take you back a little bit further, and we are going to go back into Greek mythology, which is probably one of the earliest recorded sort of versions / stories of a vampire. Probably, you know, the story of Lilith is probably the earliest writing of a vampire that we are aware of. But this is probably pretty close to, you know, being one of the earliest sort of stories of a vampire and what a vampire is. So, in Greek mythology, I'm going to have to look at my notes because I've got the whole story written down on here. So, in Greek mythology, Lamia, she was the queen of ancient Libya. So, and she happened to have a love affair with Zeus. They happened to get it on and they happened to have children together. 3, to be precise. Now, those of you that know sort of your Greek mythology, you will know that Zeus was married to the goddess Hera. And when Zeus went off and had his little affairs, let's just say she could be a little bit of a bitch. I mean, hell, she turned Arachnia into a spider. Didn't she turn someone into a cow? I know Zeus impregnated a woman via a cow. But I think Hera did turn somebody into a cow. Oh, I mean, we don't have to worry about that. But yeah, some of the Greek goddesses could be, you know, a bit of a bitch. I mean, take Medusa behind me, who you can't really see. You can sort of see her snakes, you know. Poseidon forces himself upon her and Aphrodite's like, oh no. I am going to turn you into a woman with snakes for hair and can turn people to stone. Even though it wasn't even her fault. Make that make sense. So yeah, we have now basically we have established that some of the Greek goddesses were complete and utter bitches. There we go. And now, like I said, going back to Hera. Now, when Hera found out that Zeus had these children with Lamia, she, in some stories, she kidnapped the children and possibly killed them. In other versions, she somehow got Lamia to kill her own children. So it's kind of, in that respect, it's this is going to be one of those ones that I go off topic. It's kind of one of those ones, it's like the labours of Heracles or Hercules, like in Greek and Roman mythology, where they kill their children and their wife and then they have to go and do all these labours. Seriously, I think that that Hercules had the better end of the deal than what Hera did to Lamia. So basically, because of what Hera had done, this basically drove Lamia insane. And in her grief and despair, she would basically snatch up any child that she came across. Like, she didn't care whether it was her own or, well, as we know, her children are most likely dead, so they definitely weren't her own. And she basically devoured them. And because she was devouring children, she soon started to undergo a change. That was another thing I forgot to mention in the early hours. In the early hours? In the sort of early accounts, like I say, they tend to take the life essence, usually blood, but some vampires actually apparently devoured their victims. Lovely. Lovely. Yeah, I guess that would account for them, yeah, not having fangs. They could chop them up and drink their blood like that. There we go, the possibilities, the things that we think of. Anyway. So, like I say, Lamia began to change. She had once been this beautiful woman, and she suddenly became this ugly and monstrous thing. And now Zeus, obviously, he probably went and had a go at Hera for, you know, cursing Lemire in this way, like, how dare you! I will threaten to throw my thunderbolt at you. Something like that. So, despite the fact that, you know, he was falling out of love with Lemire, and probably had fallen out of love with her because of her looks, we all know what Zeus was like. He gave her the power of prophecy, as well as the ability for her, this is pretty disgusting, so yeah, I would not recommend you listen to this part if you've just had something to eat, or if you are about to eat, because this is pretty disgusting. He gave her the ability to, there goes the phone. There goes my little light. Oh my gosh. Where was I? Oh yeah, I was saying about Zeus gave Lemire the ability, along with the ability to tell prophecies, he gave her the ability to take out her eyes and also pop them back in again, which, you know, is pretty disgusting, but this was due to the curse that Hera had put on Lemire. She had cursed Lemire with insomnia, or in some versions, every time Lemire went to sleep, she would dream of either killing her children or seeing her children killed. And, you know, she would obsess over the loss of her children. So Zeus gave her this ability to try to relieve some of the pain, because obviously if you're effectively seeing that every single day in your mind, and you can't sleep because that's the only thing you see when you go to sleep, you know, that's a pretty nice thing in a way. It's a weird thing, but it's a nice thing. That, you know, he did attempt to, you know, give her some form of relief. And he also gave her the ability to shapeshift. So here and basically in Greek mythology, this is their version of a vampire. So, sorry, my lizard's just looking at me like, Mum, what are you doing? It's going to be one of those videos today, people. So, like I say, you know, we're starting to get some similarities. You know, we've got, you know, a creature taking some form of life essence. We've got the original description, which was like a bloated, ruddy thing. This Lemire became monstrous and ugly. We have sort of supernatural abilities, and like I say, she's taking life essence. And there's, I'm trying to remember what it is, there's one in Japan, there's like a vampire in Japan that can detach its head, and the head can just like float around, and it will look for pregnant women. And it will feast on the blood of a pregnant woman and devour the fetus. It's yeah. Seriously, we have some lovely imaginations when it comes to vampires. So, now we've got like to some of the backstories. now we need to start asking all the usual questions. What's the weakness to a vampire? So, the one that most people know, sunlight. Vampires can apparently burn up in sunlight. However, if you're in the Middle Ages, that ain't gonna save you. Sun ain't gonna save you. Want to know why? Because it wasn't until sort of writers like Bram Stoker, I'm going back to Bram Stoker again, author of Dracula, came along, that they started avoiding sunlight. So originally, a vampire could effectively be walking around the place like you or me in a shroud, which is what they used to bury people in when they died. And yeah, they could just walk around day to day like nothing was going on. So like I say, with their weakness to sunlight, we now need to think of even more modern vampires. So like I said, Stephenie Meyers, who was the author of the Twilight series, kind of had part of it right. She had vampires walking around in the daytime, but when it was sunny, the Cullens always hid themselves because they were sparkly vampires. Ugh. Seriously? So yeah, like I say, originally they were not weak to sunlight, and they definitely didn't glitter. Sorry, Edward Cullen. God, has anyone even read the Twilight books? I have. God. Yes, I have read the Twilight books. I'm really sorry, but I loved them when I was a teenager. I tried to reread them again in my early 20s, and oh my gosh, what was I thinking? They were terrible. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. So yeah. Depending of which time period you're from, vampires are either weak or they're not weak to sunlight. Right, so obviously I've mentioned about the ability to shapeshift quite a bit. Like I say, this obviously links back to Lilith. It also links back to Zeus and Lemire. And also, the ability to shapeshift is also featured quite prominently, actually, in Bram Stoker's Dracula. So, in the book, Dracula himself, he can transform into many things. He can transform into a bat, he can transform into a wolf, and also, if you've read the book, you'll know that when the ship that is carrying Dracula shipwrecks off the coast of Whitby, which was actually inspired by an actual wreck that is on the coast of Whitby, he takes the form of a big black dog, a large black dog, and runs the 199 steps up to Whitby Abbey. Yes, that is what they are called, the 199 steps up to Whitby Abbey. And this isn't the only thing that he can shapeshift into. So he can shapeshift into dust within the rays of the moon, within the rays of the moonlight. I don't get how that one works, but okay. He can pass through the tiniest cracks as well, in the form of dust, in his humanoid form, and also in vapour. This is how he basically turns Lucy, who is Mina Murray's friend in the book Dracula. I think that's her name? Lucy. I wrote her name down as well. Lucy Westenra. There we go. I really need a drink. I'm going to go grab myself a drink quickly. There we go, we're back. Sorry, I just had to go and grab myself a drink. So, we have covered sort of the early tales of vampires. We have gone through some of the things that they can do. We've also said what their weaknesses. What one of their weaknesses is. So, I should probably go back to actually that shape-shifting thing. So, I think probably the main reason the shape-shifting sort of story came about is one of the most adorable little bats in the world. Well, I think they're adorable. The vampire bat that lives in... It does live in Romania, like in the Transylvania region. They live in caves. They also live in some of the Americas, I believe. And obviously, they feed on blood. They also carry sort of diseases like rabies and stuff. And actually, people wonder if like rabies was one of the things that people confused with people being vampires. Because obviously, when an animal or a person gets rabies and they become rabid, you know, obviously, they start biting to sort of try and infect the next person. So, you know, that's probably, you know, where, like, that's probably part of where the whole vampire thing comes from. But anyway, I was going to go on to how to repel a vampire. So, one way is actually, this is one that I found out. I didn't actually know about this form of repelling it. Was for people to use apotropic. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'll pop the spelling of it in by my head. Apotropic magic. So this was a form of magic that you would usually have sort of some sort of wooden figure. You'd carve a figure, and this figure was designed to sort of ward off and turn away sort of any evil spirits or any any sort of evil doing that anybody wished on you or was coming to you or anything. I'm just going to take my hoodie off. Okay. Sorry, I just got really hot there. And then, of course, there's the one everybody knows. Garlic! Let's go and hang garlic around the house. That's a good way to sort of ward off vampires. Nobody actually knows where sort of vampires not liking garlic came from. Whether it's the fact it had such a strong smell. Possibly that was something that came into it, but I was trying to look at sort of to find out where sort of garlic came from, and I really couldn't find anything. But if anybody knows where sort of garlic, vampires being afraid of garlic, like garlic repelling vampires comes from, if you can let me know, so I'd be really interested in that. Also, a branch of wild rose and hawthorn could also apparently repel a vampire, which is very interesting. Well, actually no, sorry, it says rosewood and hawthorn were actually able to harm a vampire. So people start growing your wild rose and your hawthorn. You never know, a vampire could be about. In Europe, this is actually one that I have heard of. I hadn't heard of the wild rose and hawthorn. Obviously I'd heard of garlic and that. But, you know, in Europe, one belief of how to repel a vampire was by sprinkling mustard seeds on your house. I don't know where that mustard seed comes from, but I've heard of something different, of sort of how to, of sort of a variation of that, of that one way to destroy a vampire was that you would sprinkle, I think it was poppy seeds off the top of my head, that you would sprinkle poppy seeds around this person's grave, and when the vampire rose, it would see all these poppy seeds and it would start counting them. And the idea was that the vampire would get so sort of caught up in counting the poppy seeds that you know, it would lose track of time, it wouldn't go and feed, and then suddenly, oh no, the sun's up. Oh no, Fred's turned to dust. I don't know, I just thought of a random name there. So, you know, so it's obviously, you know, along the generations, sort of, obviously that whole counting the mustard seeds on a roof has obviously slightly changed somewhere along the line of vampires, you know, counting poppy seeds until the sun comes up. Which, you know, it's quite interesting to sort of see where some of these these stories you hear as a child. So, you know, it was like when I first heard about vampires, the poppy seeds was one thing that my mum told me about. But it's like seeing that they actually used to like use mustard seeds to sort of, you know, try and ward them off. You know, you can see where sort of things have got slightly, you know, changed along the lines when it comes to vampires. Obviously, another obvious way to repel a vampire, religious artifacts. So you've got your crucifix, you've got your rosary, not rosary as in the prayer beads that the Catholics have, not rosemary as in the plant that you put with your nice roast lamb. God, this really is going to be one of those videos, one of those really random videos. And of course, holy water. So obviously the religious artifacts, the religious items come from the belief that vampires cannot tread on consecrated ground. So they can't tread sort of onto sort of the grounds of a church. However, if they were buried in the graveyard of a church and they are rising out their grave and they can't walk on consecrated ground, then how would they... Seriously, some of these stories, make them make sense. Make them make sense. And then another one is obviously, like I say, you got the holy water, and that comes from the belief that... Oh, my camera's about to die. Alright, there we go, that's better. So, no. The sprinkling of holy water does not come from the fact that my camera was about to die. It comes from the fact that it was believed in some cultures that vampires could not cross running water. Now, in sort of Bram Stoker's Dracula, we are going to go back to this. I am going to be referring Dracula quite a bit, actually. Okay, right. So, they say in Bram Stoker's Dracula, Dracula comes across the sea from Romania on a ship that, like I say, sort of was inspired by an actual shipwreck that is on the coast of Whitby. And on this ship, along with, you know, Dracula's coffin and everything, and he actually feeds off the crew, there are, there are like, how many boxes? I want to say there are about 10 boxes of dirt. So one of the beliefs is that, you know, a vampire cannot sort of leave their native soil or even cross running water without having a bit of the sort of native soil with them, which is how Bram Stoker basically gets around this. He's like, oh, vampires aren't meant to cross running water, they can't cross the sea. Here, we'll just fling a whole load of soil from Transylvania into you know, some boxes, and that's how he can get across the water. It is also believed, this is another one that I've heard, is that you could repel a vampire by sort of having a mirror that was facing outwards. So you could have a mirror on your door, because it was believed that vampires could not cast a reflection due to not having a soul. And in some of these, it goes to the extreme where they can't cast a reflection and they don't have a shadow. They actually did use that in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Also, this is one that is quite popular with a lot of sort of with sort of a lot of, well, it's not really, it was really sort of, you know, one of those things in the sort of, you know, back in the Middle Ages, because if you look at books like Dracula, or even if you look at, yeah, like I say, Dracula, and also Twilight, you know, it says that a vampire needs permission to enter. However, in most ones, no, he doesn't. Edward just comes into Bella's bedroom when she's asleep. Yeah, that's not creepy at all. Pervy vampire watching me sleep. Ooh. No, thank you. And then, of course, so going back to Mina's friend Lucy, he just comes in the form of moon rays. So no, he doesn't need permission to enter. And it was believed that once a vampire had permission to enter, however, they did use that in Buffy as well. Once the vampire had permission to enter, he couldn't leave. So sorry, Buffy, but Angel wouldn't have left. So yeah, you and all your friends would all be dead. Sorry. I love Buffy. I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I really do. But it's like, I'm kind of trying to do this from a more factual point of view. So I'm kind of like trying to sort of joke about with it a bit. But yeah, my sense of humour is probably very strange, and I'm probably going to have a lot of people like, what the hell is she going on about? Honestly, it's fine. So, there is another way of how to repel a vampire. Some claimed that when a grave that was recognised as being a vampire, this was recognised by a few different ways. One would be either a cat or a dog jumping over the corpse of the dead person, probably because of the smell, or that they would get a virgin stallion, usually a black one, to sort of go to said grave, and if it started sort of kicking and bucking or whatever, they would be like, oh no, it's a vampire. And they believe, and some people believe, that if you made bread and mixed said vampire's blood in with the flour, that would, and now Josh is going off, that would repel a vampire. There were some that even said that drinking its blood would repel a vampire. But if we're going to sort of create a vampire, some of the stories are that, you know, you have to drink the blood of a vampire in order to become a vampire. So yeah, a bit confusing, but we are going into like modern times with stuff like that. There was actually a case. I'm trying to remember where it was. I honestly can't remember, but there was a guy called Arnold Pole who was accused of being a vampire. And he'd been dead for sort of quite a while, and they opened the grave, and, you know, his hair had grown, his fingernails had grown, that's normal, and he had a bit of blood running down, so there was suddenly an, oh my gosh, vampire! Obviously they dealt with him effectively, well, the way that you would normally deal with a vampire. And the doctors basically said, yeah, if you eat dirt from the grave of a vampire, that will also repel them. I don't know how that would work. It would make you very sick and probably not taste nice either. But anyway, that's a lot of those are the ways that you can repel a vampire, apparently. Gosh. So, like I say, I've already touched on part of it, but we are now going to go into how a vampire is created. So, you know, normally it's a bite. It involves you being bitten by a vampire. Like I say, it involves you after you've been bitten. Some of the stories are after you've been bitten, you then have to drink said vampire's blood, or even just drinking blood alone. Now the phone's going off. Drinking blood alone can turn you into a vampire. There was another belief that sort of if you were buried in haste, that could turn you into a vampire. If you're buried upside down, it could turn you into a vampire. Honestly, some of the ways that you could become a vampire in the Middle Ages are just like, wow. I could basically just click my fingers and oh wow, I'm a vampire. There was also if say a corpse had a wound on its body, so if say the person had been stabbed and, you know, the wound got infected, and, you know, they believed that you needed to treat the wound with boiling water, which would hurt like hell. Yes, it would probably get rid of the infection, but it would hurt like hell. And they believed that, you know, if sort of a dead person had a wound like that and you didn't sort of pour boiling water into the wound, that person could come back as a vampire. Now, in Russia, people believed that vampires were either witches or people that had rebelled against the Russian Orthodox Church in life. people rebelled against church. So they kind of, this was one of, in sort of, especially in the medieval times, you know, religion was a big part of society. And a lot of the services were done in Latin. And, of course, most of the congregation could not speak Latin. So they had these beautiful murals on the walls that would, you know, there'd be sort of one that would depict, you know, God in heaven with Jesus. And then there'd be another one close to it that would depict sort of the devil and hell. And so obviously, you know, this was sort of a way to make sure people went to church and didn't rebel against religion, was saying, oh, you could become a vampire. Now, I have to read this bit because this is one that I found and I did quite like it. So, in Albanian folklore, it was believed if you had, I'm going to probably butcher this name, if you had a hybrid child, now the parent could be one of two. It could either be a Carcanoxel? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but that was basically like a wolf creature. Or a Lugut, which was a water demon that could produce sort of a hybrid offspring between like the supernatural and the normal, and that offspring could basically become a vampire. And it was called I'm going to butcher this, a jampire. So yeah, I'll have spellings and stuff down below because I'm probably absolutely butchering these. Right, so we've got into that. How do I kill a vampire? How do we kill a vampire? I'm just going to take a drink quickly. So there are actually many different ways of how you can actually kill a vampire. Most of the time, vampires are staked through the heart. And, you know, this tended to happen in the South Slovak. Oh my gosh, sorry, my dyslexia. The South Slavic countries. So these countries, the preferred wood was usually ash by most countries. However, in Russia and the Baltic states, they would use hawthorn. In Iberia, it was ash in Russia and the Baltic states, hawthorn in Siberia, and oak in the Silesia region. I hope I pronounced that correctly. This actually was used to be part of modern day. This is actually a main part of this old region. It's one of those regions that no longer exists. It's like Prussia. It's actually part of modern day Poland now. Another choice of wood was aspen. Now aspen, it was believed that aspen wood was used on was what the cross that Jesus Christ was crucified on. So they believed that that would, you know, be a perfectly good stake. Obviously, again, we've got these ties to religion to sort of, I would definitely say that sort of in the early times, you know, the vampires were basically like a religious scare, basically. If you didn't go to church, you would become a vampire. Of course, there goes my dead stair lift. So, like I say, potential vampires, they were staked through the heart, as we all know, and they would be staked through the mouth. This goes into overkill here. They would be staked through the mouth in Russia and northern Germany, and in the stomach in northeastern Serbia. So talk about overkill. It's like everyone else is like, yes, let's stab them in stake them through your heart. Everyone. Then there are these other countries that are like, nope, stake them through your mouth, stake them through your stomach. So, like I say, so it's believed that because when a corpse, you know, dies, you know, all the excess gas builds up and everything, so they tend to get quite bloated. And it was believed that in piercing like the stomach or the chest area, like the torso area, it was believed that if you that deflating a potential vampire would stop said vampire rising. And this really birthed the concept of the anti-vampire burials. So this is something that has been found especially in Europe. So anyone that was suspected as being a vampire, they would be buried with a sharp object such as a sickle or an axe or even a sword. I'm just labelling things off the top of my head. But most of the time it tended to be a sickle. And it was believed that if the body didn't bloat, it would then revert the transformation, or it would stop the transformation from happening at all. Now, in Germany and sort of the Western Slavic areas, there we go, I said it right now, the body was decapitated, and then the head would be placed between the feet, behind the buttocks, or away from the body, as they believed that this would basically make the soul of the person leave the body faster, because some areas believe that you know, that the soul did not leave your body straight away, and it would take some time, and they believed that, you know, the quicker the soul left the body, the safer you were of becoming a vampire. And you know, they would also, if that wasn't enough of doing that, the vampire's head, the body, or the clothes, they would spike or pin it to the ground to stop the body from rising. Now, in Dracula, we're going back to Dracula, like I say, this is going to be one of those videos that does focus, that thankfully, you know, I love the book Dracula, and I've mentioned some of these things. So in Dracula, the Dutch doctor, Dr. Abraham van Helsing, who is the resident vampire slayer, woohoo! The way they get rid of, I'm going to use Lucy Weston, which, as I've said, was Dracula's first victim in the United Kingdom. They staked Lucy through the heart. They actually, in the book, I believe, they position it by her heart, and then they use a hammer or a mallet to hammer it into her chest, and then they saw the top of the stake off and leave that in her heart. they also cut off her head and stuff the head with garlic. So just to ensure that she doesn't rise again. So, you know, we've got all these different sort of, you know, methods of how to deal with a vampire sort of all rolled into one. So the Romani people, they were like, I think, actually, I don't think, no, they weren't. So the Romani people, they would drive steel or iron nails through the heart and place bits of steel in the mouth, over the eyes, the ears, and also between the fingers. In the 16th century, there was a woman that was excavated in 2006, and they believe that she was buried in about the 16th century. This is near Venice in Italy, and they found that there was a brick forced through her into her mouth. And it's sort of, people have believed that this is a way to try to counteract vampirism, or was a form of vampire slaying. I'll pop a picture in here. But in Bulgaria, so like I say, we're going through, you know, the vampire graves that have been found. In Bulgaria, over 100 skeletons were found that were sort of, I would believe that were from about the 16th century, from about that time period, and they were all found with metal objects in them, in their torso areas. So most of them had bits of plough, like a plough bit in them. So as you can see, sort of in this time period, the fear of vampires was very, very real. Like I say, there were even further measures that people would go through to make sure that they didn't rise. So I mentioned about pouring boiling water into wounds that could possibly make you a vampire. One way was to actually pour boiling water over the grave to stop the suspected vampire from rising. So again, this is all going back to sort of running water. It would also be, and also, like I say, another way would be even to burn the body completely. So like, here we go, we have you know, cremation. And that was believed that that would stop the person from being a vampire. In the Balkans, I love this, a vampire could be killed by being shot, drowned, by repeating the funeral service, or by sprinkling holy water on the body, or even by exorcism. So obviously they believed that this was sort of a demonic thing. And finally, in Romania, garlic could be placed in the mouth, or you could shoot a bullet through the coffin. Now in some areas, this is my final point, in some areas of Romania actually, they do still have people that will sort of prepare a body and will sort of do things to make sure that the person doesn't become a vampire. So instead of like staking them and everything, they will do a sort of, they will do this whole ritual, and they will sort of simulate a staking, as it were. And yeah, that is believed that it will stop the person from becoming a vampire. But anyway, that is it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Next video that I will record, so hopefully this should be out this week at some point, and then hopefully next Tuesday I should have the second part of this video out, where we will be focusing on the Highgate vampire and maybe some other vampires that we know of. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you did like this video, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button and the bell if you would like to be notified when I put a video, and also leave a comment if you'd like. But anyway, that is it from me, and I will see you all later. Take care, everybody.